Hi gang, on today's podcast, the third of the fourth week with Last Trophy as we go through each club. Today the five are Leicester, Liverpool, the two Manchesters and Newcastle. We've got a new segment and it's live, looking at live coverage of football and how it works, what's good, what's not so good. Three of the best as usual, young player, old player. Letter from the Gantry, well that's just football live again in this country. Explain that. Right-footed players on the left flank, left-footed players on the right flank. Does it really work? And we finish with stoppage time and Mr. Carlo Ancelotti. If you want to find out more about us, go to the Patreon. If you want to read us, go to substack.com, The Joy of Football on there. Just listen. On we go. The Joy of Football podcast. With me, Neil Barnett.
And with me, Martin Tyler.
Looks like Xavi! Ready! Aguero!
The Joy of Football. Hello on the Joy of Football podcast. The electricity has been switched back on because Martin Tyler and me, Neil Barnett, we're back going live to football matches. So let's get straight into it with Last Trophy. Yes, we're continuing our look at this Premier League clubs, our preview really, even though the season has started. 5 clubs again this week, starting with Leicester City, where Martin actually went for his first live commentary of the season in the Premier League. Martin, before we get on to that, their last trophy was the Championship last season, 2024. Not forgetting that they won the League in 2016, the FA Cup in 2021. I can't forget that, with it being Chelsea they beat. And in Europe, we ought to just acknowledge Champions League quarterfinalists in 2017 and Europa Conference quarterfinalists in 2022.
And the Community Shield, having won the FA Cup. And it's often the way that in recent times that the FA Cup winners have beaten the champions. It wasn't the case this time, although it was very, very close. It was a good way to start my Premier League commentary campaign. And new manager, of course, Steve Cooper, who's one of the really good guys in football. There are plenty of them, by the way. But he has got the job because your club have taken the manager that won the championship, Enzo Maresca. And there was a bit of a carryover, some new players, not many new players, to be honest. And of course, the focus was really that Jamie Vardy was ruled out 3 or 4 days before, played very well, and sort of, spanned the generations between the only player left from that fantastic fairy tale of 2015-2016.
Well, you say that, but I think what people ought to acknowledge as well is that when they won the FA Cup in 2021, all those players have moved on, apart from Vardy and Ndidi. Yeah. And the only other player...
And Luke Thomas.
Well, that was what I was going to say. The only other player who hasn't moved on is Luke Thomas, who last season went on loan to Middlesbrough and was so rubbish he couldn't get a game. Sorry, to Sheffield United, and was so rubbish he couldn't get a game. So that loan was terminated. In the second half of the season, he went on loan to Middlesbrough.
Yeah, and he's obviously just a little bit out of the picture at the moment. But you're right, you're making the point not about Luke, but about the amount of change that's gone on. And of course, I suppose the one dark cloud over the evening, it was a very tough game for Leicester. Spurs dominated the first half an hour. You talk about dropping deep to defend. Leicester basically circled the wagons, parked the bus, and defended their own penalty area and made it very difficult. Debut for Dom Solanke, who we talked about on the podcast last week. But they got going in the second half. But the dark cloud is this threat or factual. I'm never quite sure with these financial regulations, but that they are going to be deducted points because of errors that they made financially when they were in the previous Premier League campaign the season before last. So nobody had the answer to that question. I think we all deserve the answer to that question, especially Leicester City. So whether that something will come out on that sooner, it needs to be analysed to be fair, to get the psyche right. But the fans were quite quiet for Leicester for the first half an hour. I think they were fearful. But once Vardy scored, the place lifted, and Ange Postecoglou in his post-match press conference said that really psychologically went against us as well as a scoreline, because there was a much greater backing and it was a much tighter game. But really, Tottenham should have won it.
What we have to say about Leicester is that KP Power, the ownership group, if you like, lost a lot of money through COVID because basically they were duty-free operators and obviously there was no travel. And the other thing that we've got to say about them is these rules that have been brought in to control finance, for me, are the same kind of rules that are ruining the game of football that are coming down from IFAB. They are too stringent, they are too harsh, and they are too, we know best, and you football people don't know best, and you've got to operate by these rules. Now, I know they've been set up by the Premier League itself. So
by the clubs. The clubs
so
accepted them.
Yeah, so, but the point is, the game doesn't operate like that. And it can't flourish. And I would hold up as the disaster of financial fair play as my proof of that. And financial fair play was brought in around 2008, I think, by UEFA. And that was right after Serie A had basically collapsed from being the strongest team in Europe to Juventus getting relegated, I think it was 2006, for their paying of referees, and Milan getting fined, and Inter Milan, I think it was, getting fined. And it all went pear-shaped, Serie A. And because financial fair play came in when it had all gone pear-shaped for 2 years, they've never recovered. Because the clubs that are in Europe can't invest because financial fair play is preventing it. And that's why only Inter Milan once, under Mourinho, when they won the treble, since then, have won the Champions League. No other Italian clubs won the Champions League since then. And if you bring in something that says, we're going from here, this is how it is, snapshot, it's going to be based on this snapshot, it's going to be out of date almost immediately. And poor Leicester, I think, have been a victim of that.
Well, it's in contrast, of course, to what's going to happen with Manchester City. We still wait on that. The rules are changing. And so it's almost being backdated. It's an obsolete regulation now, but it's going to be backdated, and it looks as though, unless there is a way around it, that Leicester will be caught in the middle of that. And with Forest and Everton, you're looking at the calibre of clubs that are getting punished. I mean, the justification of it is to protect the future of football clubs generally, certainly at the top level. But it also stops some of the romance of an owner coming in from nowhere and taking a team. I mean, my good friends, the class of '92 at Salford, I think if the rules had been slightly different, they would have been able to get themselves up the league. They had money to invest, but there's a limit to what they can do even in League Two, and they've been stuck in League Two now for a while, which wasn't the case. They soared through to that level, which takes a bit of doing. And now we're going to see what Wrexham can do, whether Wrexham, with their Hollywood status, will find a way around the problems that they'll run into eventually with, the capacity of the ground. I don't know what it is now. It's going up. When we played there with Woking, I think it was 8,000. I'm sure it's more than that now. But the revenue streams are great because they attract really good sponsorship. So we'll see. It is. We shouldn't be talking about this, Neil, really. I mean, I know why you brought it up, and I brought it up by saying the cloud hanging over Leicester. But that is not what football fans want to
if
know
Leicester
about.
don't get dot points, do you think they can survive?
Oh, they can. They can. I think that docking of points would make it, I might say, give you a different answer. But I think they can. I think Steve did it with Forest. I think they got 38 points his first season up with Forest, with all those chopping and changing when he got Forest promoted. And I think the measure of the man is that the Leicester fans, I mean, what's 30 miles Leicester to Nottingham, something like that they've accepted him. And that there was great backing for him and for the team. And it was a very good result because the other two promoted clubs both lost.
Great curry houses around the KP Power Stadium. That's a good thing. Right, let's move on to Liverpool. Last trophy, Carabao Cup last season. The League 2020, their only league title this season. Champions League 2019, of course. In fact, they've won one more Champions League trophy this century than they have league title. Do you think Liverpool have become a club that is happy with a top four finish?
No, absolutely not.
Are you talking about the fan base, or are you talking about the owners?
Both. I'm not. I don't know the owners. I'm talking about the management and the fan base. Certainly the fan base. And yes, it was extraordinarily unlucky for Liverpool, really, when they got the title. It was the COVID year, and I was there that night when the trophy was handed over. They made the very best of a very difficult job to try and create some passion in the stadium, the bags of passion around the city and outside the ground to some extent as well, as much as was allowed then. And that was 30 years since they won it before. When I was there, they won it in 1990, and I asked Kenny Dalglish, who was the manager, I said, when do you start thinking about winning it again next year? Is it like, basically, will you go on holiday for a week and come back, or are you already thinking about it? And that question's actually, if you look on YouTube, it's turned out to be the stupidest question of all time, because it took 30 years before they won it again, and nobody would have thought that. I mean, they were the club that everybody had to finish above to win the title, and they were serial winners. So it is strange, but history is. There's now a period for Manchester United where they were winning everything, and now they can't get their hands on the Premier League trophy. So I guess from football point of view, from the neutral's point of view, it's a good thing that it's shared around. But of course, it's not being shared around at the moment with Manchester City's domination.
And it was interesting for me that in the first game, we'd spoken a lot about Diogo Jota on this podcast.
We both fully admire Diogo Jota.
And he was selected as the central striker between Salah and Diaz, and it worked. And if he stays fit, I see that as the front three. Gakpo can come in, and obviously Nunez can come in, but I think they're the three best players of that forward.
It's fascinating to find the new pecking order. There will be a change in the pecking order after 9 years of Jurgen Klopp. Actually, I've done this week in the Champions League playoff round. The team managed Salzburg, managed by Jurgen's assistant, Pep Lijnders. And they were very much in Klopp's mode. They won away to Dynamo Kiev. Well, away, that's not quite accurate, is it? On neutral, sadly, from the Ukrainian team's point of view. But they deserved to win. It was a tight game. They deserved to win, but they pressed and they played with great personality. And he's got the energy that you'll remember in a young Mourinho, the young coach. I think he's in the early 40s, Pep. And he played a big part in the philosophy of the match, and I think just keeping the team going. So they've got a great chance of reaching the what we used to call the group stage, but we can't call it now.
It's the league stage.
It's the league stage.
Yeah. Liverpool contenders this season?
Yes, definitely, and sometimes new managers, we know they often come in circumstances where the club needs a lift to get out of trouble. Well, Liverpool aren't in trouble, and he's been given a wonderful set of players, a great club, all those supporters, and he seems to be the kind of guy who can deal with that.
He's changed one thing notably, which is he's not gone for Jurgen's 4-3-3, which it was almost all the time while he was there. He's turned Szoboszlai into a number 10 and played McAllister. And who was his other holding midfielder?
Wasn't Endo, was it?
No, I can't remember who it was. But he set them up slightly differently, and Szoboszlai was much nearer the front three as a result.
Well, he's got a free rein. I mean, this obviously comes with great responsibility to be able to keep the players on side. But I said to you in the podcast last week, the one thing I've heard out of Anfield is the players are having him, which is the greatest compliment that a coach can get from the dressing room.
For me, the biggest difference between 4-3-3 and 4-2-3-1 isn't just the number 10 being close to the front three, but actually the wingers have really got to track back more, because you haven't got that third midfielder to shuffle across and take a fullback going forward. So I don't know if Salah and Diaz, it was against Ipswich, there was a lot of Ipswich piling on attacks in the first half. Against other teams, you might have to see the wingers doing a little bit more in reverse.
But they went man for man Ipswich, and that's very hard to sustain. And I think, again, a compliment to Arne Slot. And he, when you go in at half-time and you've got some work to do and to try to sort it out, and he did sort it out. Now, whether that was just a case of the cream rising to the top of this particular fixture, the better players, I don't think it was just that. I think it was the way they played and the way they sorted out the difficulty. He changed the centre-back, didn't he? Which Jarrell Quansah looked quite disconsolate in the shots we had from the ground up in the back of the dugout for the second half, and Konate brought in. Yeah. So I
think Konate's a really good player, by the way.
They have got they've got lots of options. He's It's a good and a bad time to go in. It's a great club to manage. I'm sure we've got all the advantages of that. But to follow Jurgen Klopp, of course, is very difficult. But Klopp had this amazing sort of media personality as well, and touchline personality. And it looks that Arne's got a bit of that as well.
Yeah. I don't think Jurgen Klopp's personality completely survived going from glasses to contact lenses. I don't know. He just seemed...
It's a journey I went through about 60 years ago, Neil, and I think I've survived. And the lenses have got better and better. I have, and it's not for this podcast, but I have kept the original contact lenses that I had, which were as big as the eyeball, and you could only wear them for like 3 or 4 hours. So for playing football, it was fine. But they would be in a museum of horrors now, I think. But then, good luck to Jurgen. There are great advantages. You do look more sporty. I'm not saying you look younger, because I can't prove that point. But you always feel a bit more sporty when you're, and I'd say this to a bespectacled co-host here, respectable and bespectacled. So there we are.
Let's move on to Manchester City, who obviously won the league last season. Won the treble the season before, and won the Club World Cup this year as well, from leftover from last season. And obviously I saw them at Stamford Bridge, and the first thing I want to say about Manchester City this time round, I want to say 2 things about them. I spoke in the summer, that Rico Lewis is now 19 and he needs to get out, either on loan or permanently, if he wants to develop, because he hasn't played enough. Well, Kyle Walker hadn't played in pre-season, so he played, and he was excellent.
As he was in the Community Shield, which I was at.
Yeah. And Kyle's 34, and is a lot of his game, without in any way wishing to make it sound as though it's not a full-blown international quality player, but a lot of his game is about his pace, and a lot of Rico Lewis's game is about his brain. I think he's a completely different kind of player, and I'm just wondering how long he's going to stay in the side. I can see it being quite a while, and I can see him sharing that berth with Kyle Walker a lot this season.
Yeah, and I certainly Kyle they could play a 3 with Kyle as the right-sided centre half. Kyle can even play left back. That's been a bit of a problem for them, hasn't it? But if they want Lewis to play, Lewis can play left back as well and play in midfield. So there's lots of ways that he can get into the team. But to find that they want to take Ilkay Gundogan back, who is a wonderful player and a servant for Manchester City, absolutely splendid. But it doesn't seem to me a very positive move if you're in the young brigade.
No, it doesn't. But that brings me on to the other thing about City, and I can understand them wanting to take him back. I mean, essentially, people talk about the tactics of this and the tactics of that, and about Pep, but he hasn't really changed from that essential 4-3-3 with Xavi, Busquets, and Iniesta. He now plays what most people call 4-1-4-1 because he hasn't got the Messi and whoever was on the left for Barcelona, be it Thierry Henry or David Villa, whoever. He hasn't got them pushing forward in quite so it's more 4-1, 4-1. But the two central midfielders are De Bruyne and Bernardo Silva, and De Bruyne's 33 and Bernardo Silva's 30, and Foden is, I think, seen more as a wide player at City, and I think that if they're going to play all these games this season, they need at least 3 into 2 in that area to share the load. So I can understand
it's short term, Gundogan, but very sensible. Yeah. I'm not decrying it. I just feel from Rico Lewis's point of view, as of course they're not like for like in positions. Although, as I say, Rico Lewis could be used in midfield, and they've got a number of young players who've been on the tour with them and have progressed through that, been out in the United States. It's a fascinating stage. One thing that the hardest thing about being successful is to sustain it. Yeah. And what Manchester City have done in that respect is truly remarkable. I mean, if they were to win the league again, I can't believe in football history that any team, unless the whole game changes and some factor that propels one team into prominence, I can't see anybody doing it. It's amazing. I've been following football for 70 years, and Wolves were the team of the 50s. And Chelsea won the league in 1955, and we've had various obviously. Teams that have dominated in that period, but not quite to this extent. No. Even the great Liverpool team of the late 70s, early 80s didn't do this. No. And so we have to fill them with compliments, but you always look at it, they were lucky to win the Community Shield. I think United were the better side. You're watching it as a fan at Stamford Bridge. I'm watching it on the telly as a neutral observer, football lover, call it what you will. I thought that Chelsea missed a chance to get more from the game. I thought it was quite an even game. At 1-0, it could have gone out. Yeah. City were the better side, but at 1-0, they haven't put the game to bed. And we're going to come on to what happened to make it 2-0 a bit later.
Yeah, but possession is overrated for me at the moment. Penetration is underrated. And I think that Chelsea have a lot of possession and absolutely no penetration. But I just want to bring.
But you're a fan, so let me have the objective view on this.
I want to bring one more thing up about City. They play Haaland up front on his own, 4-1, 4-1, and so the opposition midfielders generally pick up De Bruyne and Silva, but when they have the ball, City. Quietly, De Bruyne or Silva, or both, will wander up front and be level with Haaland. And the midfielders tend to let them go. And then it's a case of who's marking them. And that's how City got their first goal. Because both De Bruyne and Silva made it up to the penalty area and weren't properly marked. And when they were marked, it left other people unmarked. It left Doku unmarked. And
this was after the unscheduled switch, which was a fascinating afterthought. And the wingers switched of their own volition.
But the movement of City is just unbelievable. Of those two in particular, is just unbelievable. And I think clubs have real trouble dealing with it and how to mark them, because it just...
I wouldn't ever accuse you of stating the obvious, Neil, but I think 4 consecutive titles prove your point that a lot of clubs have had difficulty dealing with them. But to be fair to you, and De Bruyne didn't play that much last season, and they still gave the opposition all these sort of problems.
Yeah, but he when he came back was when they went...
Yeah. He's a work of art. No question about that.
Do you think Pep told the truth and they really did switch of their own volition, Doku and Savio?
95%, yes. But there's 5% of me thinking it would be quite a clever managerial thing to give the players a little bit of credit and make people stop thinking that I'm the man who does everything. Because although he's obviously got an ego, he wouldn't be able to do what he does without it. But, that's him quite a shy, natural person, I think. And so it could be that he made it up. But I would like to think I'm a great champion of players making decisions on the pitch. In the time I've been following football, the game has changed from the players taking the responsibility to the coaches taking the responsibility. And looking at the sideline, the number of times you're watching games, Premier League games, where everyone's looking to the bench to see what should we do. Well, if they went and did it on their own, and they are young players, so well done to the both of them. And it worked. You can only do it if it works.
And One final question. We all know, those of us who work in football, that you don't prioritise targets at the beginning of the season. Well, you do. You prioritise the league and the Champions League if you're a Manchester City, obviously. But beyond, you come to each game and you pick your team, and you may look 1 or 2 games ahead, but essentially you can't afford to prioritise one over the other. But with the new 32-team Club World Cup, if it does take place at the end of the season, in Pep's heart of hearts, if he could only win one trophy this season, the Premier, the Champions League, or the Club World Cup, what do you think he'd choose?
The next match.
It's an old cliche.
He wants to win. He wants to win everything. I think that it's a new tournament. It's controversial, getting some publicity like the other one didn't. The one that was played in the middle of our winter, in which City have had success. So it's totally. I look at the League Cups they've won. Yeah. FA Cup final, they won it the year before last. They got to the final again this time. They want to win everything, and I think that's what sets him apart. Apart from all the skills and the ability of the club to sign the best players, he's a winner in capital letters.
Okay, more to come on a last trophy later in the podcast when we'll be doing Manchester United and Newcastle. But we're moving on now to a new segment, and one that will be close to Martin's heart because it's called...
And it's live!
Yeah, live coverage of football. And I watched this weekend, the first La Liga weekend, Valencia versus Barcelona. Of course, I should say Valencia versus Barcelona. But it was very, very interesting. Apart from that, it was a really good game. It was very interesting because at half-time, what basically happened was Valencia took the lead, and probably the better team, and Barcelona equalised a minute before half-time. So it was 1-1 at half-time. But quite clearly, the television and live coverage and the media officers of the two teams knew that there was going to be a player interview as they came off. And not surprisingly, television went with Valencia because they were 1-0 up. And as a player came off, he was set up to do an interview live on the side of the pitch. But it had just gone to 1-1, so it was intriguing. It was absolutely intriguing. And I'll come on to the other thing that happened that was unusual, but how do you feel about player interviews on the pitch side as they come
all
off?
This has been done 100 times before by 100 different channels. I've interviewed players during the halftime break. I've interviewed managers going out for the second half. We've had interviews and during the matches. The famous one is 40 years ago when the Crazy Gang, managed by Dave Bassett, the old Wimbledon, were playing at Bury. They'd won the league. Bury, which I was working for Granada, the local club near Manchester, they had to win to have a chance of getting promotion last day of the season. But Wimbledon, who were much bigger and stronger, were 2-0 up after 10 minutes. And then it had been planned to interview Dave Bassett, who was a very chatty guy, still a very chatty guy, and he'd given permission for this to happen. So our reporter went up to the manager who was winning by this margin, and the question was, well, you started great. What's the difference between the two teams? 2 goals, mate. And that was the end of the interview. So listen, I'm sure you're intrigued by it, Neil, but it's just part of what television wants, to get us close and behind the scenes, past all barriers, coverage of a match, and it'll last for a while. Somebody will say, I don't want to do it, and then there'll be something said that's perhaps a 4-letter word in our language, and it'll stop, or it'll go on and they'll do longer interviews. But as long as it's not majorly intrusive, it does add a little bit. It's always, we all want to talk to players, don't we? We're going to have guests on our show at some point. So, I mean, I know you're excited, but for me, it's just like a day in the office, really. That's what people do in television.
And in they also had a drinks break. And in one of the 2 drinks breaks, the television was allowed to put a microphone over the group, and the Valencia manager was giving a team talk, and they filmed and heard the team talk.
It happens. Sometimes, that's clearly done with permission. Sometimes it's just there's a microphone there and you can hear it. Fade up the sound. I can hear people saying that in my ear. You stop talking, fade up the sound. And we can, usually, maybe when it's going to extra time.
That's when you get the effing and blinding. I was amazed that it was agreed to, because I can't think of a contemporary manager who wouldn't be effing and blinding at that stage.
I don't know. I think...
Apart us and Wenger did.
Well, I would give you this example, Neil, that COVID, when we had the actual option, we were allowed as broadcast to be in the ground, was a great privilege at that time, but we gave the option of cheating crowd effects that were done specifically for that particular game. You get an Anfield loop of sound from a Liverpool game if you were at Liverpool, or you could listen. And I thought I'd spend the whole of that period apologising for the language of the players, and inappropriate. Sorry if you heard inappropriate language. You hear these things from time to time, but it didn't happen. The players realised that if they swore, it would be all over, and they tempered their behaviour accordingly. So I think as long as people know, there used to be fights in the tunnel in football, especially at certain clubs. And once the camera was in the tunnel, those fights stopped. So I suppose it's CCTV, none of which we really perhaps like in our lives, but it's actually does have a positive effect, probably in society as well as football.
Okay, well, we'll come back to And It's Live and discuss television coverage as the season goes on. But onwards to 3 of the best.
And he makes them pay.
The best. He's made them pay, and that completes a wonderful hat-trick.
Which we're going to do in a different order this week. And actually, I'm going to go first this time.
Quite right.
So, my old player, I'm going for Graham Souness, who I think many people who watch him on television think that he's one of the best pundits, and he's kind of been cast aside. But he's still writing in a newspaper, or at least dictating.
He's still on the main sports radio station as well.
Sport, yeah. And I think he's been an outstanding pundit. I think if you're not of a certain age, you don't realise quite what an outstanding player he was. And really, he was kind of at the vanguard of holding midfielders, wasn't he? With Liverpool, when he joined them from Newcastle. Did he join them from
Middlesbrough?
Middlesbrough.
He went from top to
Middlesbrough.
Yeah.
But he became this holding midfielder. He was a dirty as well, which he'd admit.
Pragmatic.
But he was an outstanding player. And he was a not bad manager. He wasn't a great manager, but he was a not bad manager, and he won the League Cup with Blackburn in an era when they weren't as rich and wealthy as they were when they won the league. He won the FA Cup with Liverpool, of course, and he won countless leagues with Rangers. He transformed Rangers in many ways from the club that was not necessarily stronger than Celtic to being much stronger. But I want to pick up on one thing that he said in the last week or two that I just think is so spot on. And this is just a bit of punditry that people ought to hear. And it's about, with apologies to our Manchester United supporting production team here, but it was about Matthias de Ligt. And he just very simply said, why would you buy someone if you're Manchester United who Juventus and Bayern Munich didn't want and have sold? And I just think, yeah, that's just so obvious. And that's why you're such a good pundit. And I'm sitting here completely perplexed that my club has bought João Felix, who Atletico Madrid didn't want and Barcelona didn't want. And hang on, Chelsea didn't want when he was on loan. And yet they've gone back and bought him. And that's obviously down to the directors of football. But I just think Graham Souness was a great player and has been a great pundit. And I just want to recognise that.
And he still is. He still is. I listen to him on the radio. I know him very well. I spent a lot of time working with him, travelled with him, commentated with him. And he's there's no agendas. He calls it as he sees it. And I think that's the best quality you could ever say about a pundit. Top guy.
Mm-hmm. Apart from the fact he's a Liverpool supporter. That's the only but he can't help that. Your old player.
Well, I've been mentioned a couple of times already. I went to Leicester for their opening game against Spurs, and the game was transformed by Jamie Vardy, who wasn't supposed to play. I'd been to the training to do my prep on the Friday before, and he was just out to do his first training session, really. And I think the question was actually asked, we are struggling by Steve Cooper. We are struggling to get the recognised striker to play in this very important game, first game back in the Premier League, and up went the hand, I'll play, boss. And though match fitness was totally out of the question, and generally he's of an age now where stringing together, a whole Premier League season as he's done in the past is probably going to be too hard for him. But cometh the hour, cometh the man. It was an hour or so that he played, a little bit more than that actually. He scored a goal, should have, by his own admission, scored a second one, but he was quite rightly. There were one or two issues. He's always a bit chippy as well. I think he left the game with firing a few comments at one or two Tottenham players, and the Spurs fans got involved as well. But that's the spark that makes Jamie Vardy the player that he has been and continues to be.
Player this week, I'm going for Erling Haaland, who obviously got the opening goal for Manchester City at Chelsea. I'm going for him because this really upsets me. He joined Manchester City in 2022, and since then, in the month of August, he has scored 13 Premier League goals. In that time, Chelsea have scored 11. The only thing that cheers me up...
The 3 August that we've had, he's been here 2.5 August, hasn't he? Yeah.
The thing that cheers me up is that Manchester United have only scored 9. Haaland has scored more goals than Chelsea or Manchester United in the Augusts that he's been here. I mean, I have questioned whether he gets goals against the top defences, and he certainly wasn't against the top defence on Sunday against Chelsea. But the bloke is an absolute phenomenon. And I just look at him and I think, I'd love to have him in my dressing room because he looks such a competitor and such a smile on his face, even though it can be a growl if he doesn't like the look of you.
What I would say is so unfair that he gets judged by the number of touches or the fact that lack of frequent touches, and yet the ratio of touches the goals would be equally impressive. I can't imagine anybody has got anything quite like that because he's out of the game for long periods the way City play. And it does, I've said this to you on the podcast before, I would love to sit down and talk to him because he's a footballer and you want to be involved. When you play football, you want to be involved in the game. But the role is, I don't know if you know anything about netball, but it's a bit like the goal shooter in netball. Only 2 netball players can score, and the City obviously that's not a good analogy for a team game like football. But the shooter, he is the shooter. He gets the ball, and his job is to score, and he does. But the only but is, I'm sure he would like more touches.
Before the game, in the Chelsea press conference, Enzo Maresca was asked if the Chelsea team had to adapt to different centre forwards, Jackson and Kunku, Gue, then a youngster they've signed from Barcelona, and how much did the team at Manchester City have to adapt when Haaland joined? And his answer was actually quite interesting. His answer was, well, at Manchester City, I think you have to admire how much Erling adapted to Manchester City.
I think that's a brilliant answer because that must be the truth. That must be the truth because he's used to be, when you're a focal point and you're scoring all those goals, he's done it, and the goals are still a staggering amount. August, September, October, November, all the way through, he'll be doing it again. And but it is a very interesting sort of personal dynamic with what he would like to do, with what the coach wants him to do and orders him to do, pretty much, and the genuine love of what playing a game of football. If you play outside maybe professional football, you'd be very disappointed if you came off having 8 or 9 touches, even if you'd scored 3 goals, And so I think the restrictions he's put on himself to adjust to what the Pep wants, you're right, it's a phenomenon.
Your player?
I went to Leicester. Have I told you this? And there's a guy called Jamie Vardy. And I've praised him for being old and doing very well. I just want to praise him myself. His runs, he still makes the runs. And I talked to him afterwards about he didn't run against Van der Ven when Van der Ven was voted the quickest player in the entire Premier League last season. And he said, no, it wasn't like that. It was the way that the build-up goes, and I have to bend around. And these are not runs just made because I can run. These are runs made with great thought. And I spoke to... I don't think I'm breaking a confidence here. Steve Cooper's dad, Keith Cooper, was a former Premier League referee. An outstandingly good one too, from Pontypridd, I think, in South Wales. And he was at the game, as obviously as a family member would be. And I rang him up the next day for a chat, and we've known each other a long time. And I said, "What did you think?" And he said, "It was very difficult, wasn't it, in the first half?" And he said, "I was just watching Vardy." Because when they tried to get out, he was making all the movements possible. So he can still do that. Another Premier League goal, he's got a 1-year deal. I'm sure there were thoughts at the hierarchy that maybe his time has gone. Maybe we should keep him as a figurehead. Well, he's ahead of the attack still. So he's my player.
Well, I just want to say one thing about him, which I think I may have said once before on the podcast. I don't think he's ever got the... recognition for being a natural finisher that he is, and he's not talked about in the same breath as Robbie Fowler or Jermaine Defoe, those kind of players. But I think when you see him, he's a poacher. He's a one-on-one. When he's through, it's a goal, and I think he doesn't, because it's all about pace, or it seems to be, and it's all about the Leicester way, and I don't think he's actually had the recognition he deserves for being a natural finisher.
Well, he's getting it on this podcast today.
Yeah, okay, good. Right. Young player. We're going to finish with young player. And before I talk about mine, I want you to say his name.
Alejandro Balde.
Thank you. Alejandro Balde, who we all call Baldy, of course, because...
you can.
Yeah, because I can. The Barcelona left back. When Barcelona won La Liga in 2023, he was 18 years old. Was it 2020? Anyway, he was 18 years old. 18, 19. He was and he was playing every game and won the league. He got into the Spain side, as all these youngsters seem to do on a regular basis. But last season, he had constant hamstring injuries, and therefore Barcelona they had so many injuries last season, and they were held back as a result. I think he would have been the Spain left back without doubt in the Euros had he been fit. It worked out great for Marc Cucurella, who's got giant hair and I love. But Baldy would have been the number one choice, I have no doubt. He got himself fit. He started the season. He was excellent to begin with at Valencia, and his hamstring let him down, and he had to go off again. And I don't know how long he's out for, and I don't know how bad it is. But these guys who are all sinewy and muscly and have remarkable pace, they often have these hamstring problems that take a long time to overcome. Ryan Giggs was like that. In the 90s. People forget every year that Manchester United didn't win the league, Giggs always had a hamstring problem and was out for 3 months. Ben Chilwell seems to be like that.
Michael Owen, of course.
Reece James, yeah. And Tony Dorigo had hamstring problems. He was another one who was ran like a hare, but Baldy is an outstanding player, but there's an issue there, and I want him to be fit because he would be on the world stage, and it's just a shame. Your young player.
Well, at Leicester, I came across a player who was released as a 16-year-old by a league club and had to go and work in a factory and played not even the highest level of non-league football, and gradually got recognised that he was a missed talent by the club that let him go. But
who was that?
Sheffield Wednesday. I think you know where I'm heading now. I didn't want to give too many clues away, and then fought his way through non-league, better levels of non-league football, and got himself through that into the Football League, and then got a move to what was a Championship club, I believe then, and then became a Premier League winner. And so my young player, because he wasn't recognised as a player when he was 16 or 17, is Jamie Vardy. I'm going the whole hog because it was a great night for him and for Leicester on Monday. And he has got a childish look about him. He plays with the enthusiasm of a young person. And we've got a black cat, which is very lucky in our podcast here. Which one is that?
That Tamori's about to attack Tammy, and I'm just trying to stop him.
What usually happens in that contest? Have you got the head-to-heads available?
Tammy squashes him.
I think that's normal. Right. Well, we'll bring you up to date if that happens while we're still on the air. So it's a Jamie Vardy love him from my point of view because he's a character. He's still he's built a career from very humble beginnings. He's never let his feet get off the ground except when he leaps to head a goal to get an equaliser against Spurs. And I think all of us who love football for the people who play it as much as the game itself should be grateful for what he's given Leicester City and what he's given to the game. He's not everybody's cup of tea, I would accept that, but he has wings. I think that's probably the reason why he's so successful. You'll have to read into that what you wish, but I'm not doing any sponsorship on this podcast.
And he turned down Arsenal. Having won the league, he turned down Arsenal to stay at Leicester.
Yes, so his loyalty's been absolutely 100%. And he's as fresh-faced as say, desperate to play. He won't play every game, but when he does play, the opposition will have to take good care of him. Otherwise, over 100 goals since his 30th birthday. That's a feat in itself, isn't it?
Okay, that is three of the best. Still to come, last trophy with Manchester United and Newcastle. But before that, we have Letter from the Gantry by Martin Tyler.
Letter from the Gantry.
Well, thanks as always, Neil. You always give me a nice intro here. I hope the copy lives up to it. I realise that by the time you're listening to this, you will probably be deep into the second weekend of the new Premier League campaign. But I do want to reflect on the opening round of fixtures. And I have to start with some great news for commentators. Newcastle United's shirt numbers, red on black and white stripes, have been a source of consternation and on this podcast a topic of conversation. So what a delightful surprise when they ran out against Southampton with the white patch on the back of the shirt that meant total clarity for the numbers on that patch, which are now black. This will make an assignment covering the Magpies no longer a cause for sleepless nights for we broadcasters. Mind you, the club teased my profession last season with the unveiling of this significant alteration, but it proved to be a one-off, so fingers crossed now. On a more serious note, I saw signs that the latest initiative to improve VAR already has had an impact. The application of the term the referee's call, akin to the often used umpire's call in cricket. This encourages the on-field official to show the courage of his convictions and those in the VAR hub to be less frequent and less forensic in their interventions. It's a nuance maybe, but in studying all those first 10 games, I detected a better balance in the process. One other event, which is not exactly new but definitely rare, a Premier League goal from Mateo Kovacic, and against his old club, and a match clincher, as the champions were only edging towards a winning start, leading 1-0 at the time. With only 4 successful strikes in 142 Premier League games for Chelsea, the home supporters might well have been shouting, "Shoot!" as the Croatian moved forward. A few seconds later, they would be cursing and probably recollecting a similar rare but sensational Kovacic goal against Liverpool at the same end of Stamford Bridge a couple of years ago. There was also a distinct change of fortune for Aston Villa, a chastening start to last season, thrashed 5-1 at Newcastle. No one was thinking Champions League then after those 90 minutes, but a 2-1 victory at West Ham, much more in keeping with that 4th place finish in May. The coaching craft of Unai Emery was very evident again when 3 of his substitutes combined for the winner, driven in by John Duran. For the rest, a lot of similarities. Manchester United won 1-0 with a late goal. Mo Salah scored for Liverpool, the 9th time he has netted in a first-game fixture. Erling Haaland again started as he means to go on. His 3rd season with Manchester City, 2 goals at West Ham on his Premier League debut, 2 at Burnley 12 months ago, and another away strike, this time at Chelsea. Last season produced a record number of Premier League goals, 1,246, and just 21 over the first weekend suggested the momentum had not carried over. But the 10 games 12 months ago produced 28, so not such a shortfall. Then there were 8 English scorers, this time just 3. Only Arsenal's Bukayo Saka figures on both lists. The other 2 this time around come from the evergreen category. 33-year-old Danny Welbeck, scoring for a 31-year-old manager, Brighton's Fabian Hutzler at Everton, and Jamie Vardy, who'll turn 38 during the season, heading the long weekend's final goal for Leicester against Spurs. Inevitably, there was a goal conceded by a goalkeeper playing out from the back in faulty fashion. Southampton's return to the top flight, marred by the mistake from Alex McCarthy at Newcastle. But for a distinguished end to the last campaign, he would have been beginning this term with another club. For example, he kept a clean sheet at Wembley in the promotion playoff final against Leeds and was recently awarded and rewarded with a 2-year extension to his stay with the Saints. At 34, he is not as foot-friendly with the ball as many of the younger keepers, and some Southampton fans would say the goal at St James's Park was an accident waiting to happen. But surely it should not have been so costly. Newcastle were down to 10 men for over an hour. Fabian Schär, his number 5 crystal clear on those newly designed shirts, had been sent off. Alex McCarthy and his manager Russell Martin would have been entitled to demand answers from the strikers after the final whistle. They should have made the keeper's error irrelevant, but squandered their chances against depleted opposition. But perhaps I should declare a vested interest here. Alex once played for my club, Woking.
I have to tell you that I didn't shout shoot when Mateo Kovacic burst through. I shouted, "You can't let him score!" But they could. Interesting thing you talk about Alex McCarthy and the goalkeeper giving away the ball. Last season, for the first time, I kept statistics on how many goals are conceded by losing the ball in your own half and how many are scored by winning it in the opposition half. And of course, Manchester City's second goal at Stamford Bridge, Wes Fofana shanked a clearance when they were playing out from the back, and it went to Kovacic. And it's...
I was thinking that maybe the Chelsea players would have thought, well, he's not going to score. But then I thought, well, half these Chelsea players didn't play with him because they're new. So.
Yeah, hardly any. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The Leicester of the South. Great, brilliant. Letter from the Gantry, and of course you can read Letter from the Gantry as well. They go up on our Substack site, substack.com, which under the Joy of Football as well. Okay, let's go back to Last Trophy. 2 clubs to take us to 3/4 of the Premier League done in here. Manchester United, last trophy, the FA Cup in 2024.
The Community Shield, they could have got. I always think they should have got, but that. The late goal spoilt it for them. Didn't it?
But the important ones. Well, the FA Cup's important, but no league title since 2013. People forget, of course, a not too distant European title, albeit not the Champions League, the Europa League in 2017. Manchester United. Can I? Oh, look, I'm pausing and I'm stuttering because I know what I want to say and I don't want to upset people, but I'm going to say it. Manchester United have lost their DNA because they are friggin' boring. Their whole thing of Manchester United was the dream. They'd try and win the game in the first 15 minutes. 2 flying winners, 2 extraordinarily talented forwards. And when I first saw them, they had Johnny Giles on one wing and Bobby Charlton on the other. He wasn't a midfielder by then, Bobby Charlton. He moved back there, and their forwards were probably Dennis Law and David Hurd or something. And they always right up to Ronaldo and Giggs with Rooney and Tevez or whoever in the middle, and they're just boring.
Well, they're not a team that's going to win the league. That's the problem. I think the one thing we've always complimented Manchester United on is the fact they grasp the possibility of the Premier League quicker than anybody else. They grasp the commercial opportunities. They perhaps had a head start in terms of their image around the world.
But they did it in football terms.
Yes, they did it in football. They backed up the commercial side, backed up the football. Now you think it's the other way around, that the football's backing up the commercial side, that's more important. And the decision-making since the great Sir Alec retired has not been anything but flawed, really. Some good people have had a go at it, but the system seems to be, the way the club is run, I think, has worked against those successes. There's no question about it. When Jose Mourinho said finishing second was one of his greatest achievements in management, I think you have to take that with a pinch of salt, but the truth is it had a lot of truth in it, I think. The club just... I think there's a sense of expectation that's very hard. The history is very hard for those doing the job now to live up to. Now there's a complete overhaul, and new people are being put in the jobs that remain, and quite a lot of jobs have gone, and maybe it got out of hand in that respect. Maybe we never like to see people lose their jobs, but maybe it's actually making the club more compact will make this football more successful.
I'm always surprised when you go around football clubs, how many people work in them who aren't supporters of the club. It's almost frowned upon, I think, by a lot of management, higher management. And I remember being at Leeds training ground and being talked to by a Manchester United supporter, and I just thought, God, those two clubs hate each other. You know, how can it be to work for them? And I'm even surprised at Manchester United, the number of people who work there who aren't United supporters.
But the staff expands in the Premier League to fill the money available, and the money available is huge. And that's what's happened. Jobs that have been created that were never there before and probably not very necessary. So I think a trimming down, as I say, I feel very sorry for those who have lost their jobs and some really good long servants who are Manchester United.
Well, they need to give some new jobs to people to maintain the stadium, and they're going to.
Yeah, that's an issue, and they will redevelop the stadium or rebuild the stadium. I think that's long overdue. It's just such a shame because it was a sort of state-of-the-art stadium. Yeah. And all the success, all those early years, and if you watch the Premier League years on Sky Sports, they always seem to end with Fergie holding up the trophy.
Yeah, what I will say about Old Trafford is wherever you sit in it, you get a good view. It's not like
a proper
some
football
of those,
ground. Yeah.
It's not like some of those where you have to, take an oxygen mask with you in order to enjoy.
Well, I think the stand opposite the dressing room, so opposite the tunnel, that's huge. I think. I was told once you have to be under 55 to be a steward up there.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I don't think you have to be under 55 to go and sit up there. But there is a certain amount of height there.
Talking of age, can I just bring up one player? United. A lot of negative media reports last season about Casemiro, and how many times he was run past, and how he can't do this and how he can't do that. But he didn't have a good pre-season last year. He didn't have a good season. I admit that. But I thought the previous year, Ten Hag's first year, the year in which they qualified for the Champions League.
And won the League Cup.
I thought he was one of the best 2 or 3 Premier League signings of that summer. I thought he was outstanding. And he's had a good pre-season this time. And he didn't play Copa America, did he? I don't think he was fit to go. No. And I think he is looking in the Community Shield and the game against Fulham like the old Casemiro.
I can vouch for the Community Shield. It was, if you remember, he didn't play in the cup final because he was named as a substitute and damaged himself in the warm-up. And I don't know whether it was just a thank you to get back in the team, because he had to fill in at centre-back when it's not really his position, and been exposed. And in doing a job for the club, he'd actually let his reputation slip a little bit. So I think he deserved another crack, and if that's what he's getting, he's making the most of it. But he's been an outstanding player for a long, long time. And what he's one of those that makes it awkward for commentators, because he comes into the box very late, and he's a very good header of the ball. So he gets goals which you think might be going to somebody else, and then he arrives, and the opposition probably think it's going to somebody else, and he catches them out. So, yeah, he's not living on borrowed time, let's put it like that.
And he's always been on my shortlist for the person you most hate to meet on a dark night and piss off. Because he...
Not quite sure what you mean by
well,
this.
If you pissed him off, I think you come out second. He is just so hard.
No,
I love him. I think he's brilliant.
Gentle giant, I'm
Yeah.
sure. I'm sure as a person. I don't know him as a person, but
Manchester United this season, then, what would be a good season?
the Manchester United fans think a good season would be winning the league. I don't think that's going to happen. But the new initiative, they've really put their heads above the parapet, haven't they, the owners, about how the club's going to be run. They've got bright young things in Jason Wilcox and Dan Ashworth in their particular roles at the club. They've got, I think, full backing for Erik ten Hag. We'll see, won't we, as that goes on. I think they made the right decision. I don't think there was an outstanding candidate at the time that decision was made, who was available. I think what he did to win the FA Cup and the way they won it deservedly. I was pleased. I was there when Louis van Gaal, virtually sacked at Wembley, having won the FA Cup, and I thought when I arrived at Wembley for the FA Cup final that would be the case again, whatever happened. But I'm glad it's not. So Eric will know that he's got to deliver, but it would be wrong, I think, for the owners now to turn around after maybe 2 or 3 bad results at the start and say, well, we got that decision wrong, he's got to go. So I think there's some stability there. It's a long way round of saying it, which wasn't there, certainly over the second half of last season. And they've got some good players. It'd be interesting to see what happens with Jadon Sancho, who is a very good player, but clearly has had his differences and showed how good he was when he ended up playing the Champions League final for Dortmund. So they need a better season from Rashford, who again has great ability, and I think because of the complexities in his life, he's done some fantastic work outside of football, it caught up with him a bit. And I know people question some aspects of his behaviour, but he put himself really into situations that probably he didn't expect to be in, but handled it all magnificently. I think a lot of him as a person, and 1 or 2 transgressions shouldn't spoil that. I also think a lot of him as a player. So I hope that comes good for him. And those things happen and they fall into place, then they could finish in the top 3.
I think they'll struggle to get the goals. I don't think they'll make the top 4.
That's the point I'm making, really.
Yeah. Okay, and a team I think will make the top 4 is our final team this week, Newcastle. Now, this is remarkable. This, for such a huge club, this is remarkable. Last trophy won was the Championship in 2017.
Oh yeah, you've got to get your figures right, because on this piece of paper you've got Man United winning the FA Cup in 30-34.
Yeah.
And I think, however much you are a fortune teller, I think that's a bit of a gamble with that one. So yeah, 2017. But that's winning the second tier. What you're going to say is about the
last major trophy they won.
Yeah.
Is the Intercities Fairs Cup. Even before that was the pre-runner to the UEFA Cup, which is the pre-runner to the Europa League in 1969. The last major domestic trophy they won was the FA Cup in 1955. after which they lost an early Charity Shield 3-0 to Chelsea. Get in there.
They won the FA
wasn't
Cup
there.
in 51, 52 and 54. They've won it 3 times in quick succession, hadn't they?
And the last time they won the league
52.
was in 1927.
Yeah.
By the way,
that's amazing.
it's worth saying Manchester United have won the league 20 times, and 18 of those times were with Sir Matt Busby or Sir Alex Ferguson. So they've only won it twice without those 2 managers. So for our two producers here are punching the air when I say 20. Basically, you're not going to win it again in your lifetime, boys. Just accept it.
But Newcastle. We've every time a commentator goes to Newcastle and they see the wonderful fans, the city centre stadium, which has been magnificently developed, and the whole passion.
And it's up on the hill. So when you cross the bridge, over the River Tyne, you can actually see it like a castle. In the distance.
Yeah. Newcastle, that's obviously what it is. So I would say that has had a negative effect. The pressure of playing for Newcastle has been very difficult. Clearly, when Kevin Keegan was manager, they came so close. They really had a team worthy of being champions, the entertainers. And, this is a different kind of team. It's a good team. It's perhaps a more balanced team in terms of defending as well as attacking. And they found the pressures of playing the Champions League last season a bit too much for them.
And they were hard done by in the Champions
League
by refereeing decisions.
By a handball,
they should have won. They should have won at Paris Saint-Germain rather than draw, and that would have changed everything.
Yeah, and they ended up not being in Europe at all.
It was a disgrace. Actually,
it was a very bad night for them. But they will have learnt how to manage the resources a bit better. They're still in that situation where they're probably expected to spend a lot of money because of their.
I don't understand their finances.
No.
that they say to stay in the financial restrictions that the Premier League places on clubs, that they can't spend more money. Why can't they just invest it? Is it because the owners don't want to invest it as a gift and have to want to invest it as a loan, and therefore it won't count? Sure, if they want to invest it as a gift, they can.
Well, I don't think so, because otherwise everybody would be doing that, wouldn't they? I mean,
well, because you can't get the money back. No, they wouldn't be doing it because they don't want to part with the money.
Well, anyway, their finances have come into scrutiny because Amanda Staveley, who played a massive part in all this takeover happening, felt she couldn't sustain her 6%, because obviously you have to put money in. And that amount of money. So it suggests to me that if 6% is a problem, and then the whole total is enough to invest in a team that could fulfil the potential that we all thought would happen. And it felt like they won the lottery, didn't it, when they had the Saudi owners to take over. So we'll see. I mean, the relationship with the Middle East seems to be improving a bit. Obviously, there's a World Cup to come. Qatar's World Cup was actually very successful, I thought, as a football event, despite all the negatives about the society. So maybe some of those feelings that these are the wrong people in charge will go away. I think, to be fair, they should be treated as what they do for the football club. But I do detect a bit of anti-Newcastle feeling because of it, a bit like anti-Manchester City as well, for the same model of ownership. But they are... It's a great place to go. It's a great place to watch football.
Yep.
It's a great city. I believe I'm talking about their shirts today, but they were the first club to embrace the concept of replica shirts. Although a lot of them in the middle of December take the shirts off, which again is a part of the miracle of Newcastle as a city. But I wish them well. I think Eddie Howe's a top person. I know Graham Jones very well. He's one of his coaches, and I know how hard they are working to turn this the fruits of the investment, if you like.
I think that
into silver.
One of the things that damaged them last season was the injury to Nick Pope. Who is an old-fashioned goalkeeper. He's lousy with his feet. He's just lousy. They've just got to accept that. But
he can do all the rest very well.
He is one of the best shot savers. He's up there with the best of the shot savers. And they've got him back. If Fabian Schär can stay on the pitch, and I've always found him grumpy as a person. I've interviewed him here and there. I've always found him a bit grumpy. I think he's a wonderful player. He makes mistakes, but which maybe he's just short of world class. But he's world class on the ball.
Maybe
he's a wonderful
he
player.
didn't have a conventional football upbringing because he worked in a bank, and these are the lines that commentators trot out. And Gary Neville said to me, how did that come about? And I said, that would be telling, which if you think hard about it, is a joke. Bank tellers, have you?
They haven't got Botman till the new year, so they need to sort that other place out next to Schär. But I think they'll score goals. I think Newcastle can hit they haven't got Europe. I think they'll hit the top 4 again.
We'll see.
Okay, that's that. The last 5 clubs will be in next week's last trophy, and then we'll have done the whole of the Premier League. We now move on to our penultimate segment this week. Explain that. Martin, explain. We have talked a lot about this, basically because of the Euros and where Saka played and who didn't play left back.
Yeah, you're obsessed about it.
I am a little bit. So I kept a record this weekend of left-footed players on the right and right-footed players on the left in attack. And what intrigued me is I'm not concerned about which is your better foot. I'm just concerned about whether you can deliver the ball when you have to. And I just want to bring up these goals. Manchester United won, Fulham 0. Xerxes scored from a low cross from the right by Garnacho with his right foot. Ipswich 0, Liverpool 2. Jota opened the scoring for Liverpool, tucking home more of a pass than a cross.
It wasn't a cross.
But it was a right-footed ball by Mohamed Salah, so renowned for being left-footed only. A right-footed ball for Salah, setting him up. Everton 0, Brighton 3. The opening, what a performance by Brighton. The opening goal by Mitoma Minte, their summer signing, with a right-footed cross from the right.
It was a wonderful cross.
It was, in order to feed Mitoma. West Ham 1, Aston Villa 2. The winning goal for Villa by your friend Duran, his only goal, so it wasn't Duran. Jacob Ramsey with a left-footed pass, left-footed cross from the left, having been put in with a left-footed touch by Ian Martson from the left touchline. And I think that this obsession with Premier League, with managers at the moment, of putting the inverted player, the right footer and the left footer, on the opposite flanks, can be damaging. Now, Bukayo Saka served up Kai Havertz with a left-footed cross from the right.
And that was a cross.
It was, and it was brilliant. But it found Havertz on the move. It was the only way he was going to head it in. And your game, Fatawu, is that how we pronounce his name?
Yeah, Fatawu. It's not too much on the woo. I've got it on they're wonderful, the Premier League. They send out all the players talking to the camera and saying, I had an interesting one, just a sidetrack here. Lucas Bergvall, who's the new Spurs signing, his name is Lucas Bergvall. He's made that quite clear, and is with the G in, you remember Sven Joran is Goran, but we accepted it. So we accept some of the Scandinavians. Anyway, he hadn't played before, so I was working for the Premier League, and we had all these videos sent of it, every club, every player, every club saying their names. And he said it very confidently, Lucas Bergvall. So that's what we called him. Paul Robinson and I, the former Spurs goalkeeper, former England goalkeeper, we did in tandem. And I'm sure that's not what was said on the domestic broadcasters. But that's...
Well,
so how did we get onto that?
Fatawu.
Oh, yeah, because he played in the game.
Yeah, and that was a left-footed cross
but
from the right.
It's not Fatawu, it's Fatawu.
Fatawu.
It's like a throw.
Fatawu. It was a left-footed cross from the right for Vardy's header. Although
has he had enough mentions, Jamie Vardy, in this?
He was square. He was square on with the defender, so he could have gone either way. But he went on his strong foot. But what I'm saying is,
and that was a cross.
Yeah, but
I've been talking about passes with Salah, and I think with Ramsey as well. I think they're passes, not crosses.
But it's about your ability to hit the ball early and hit it where you want to hit it. And I think that there are too many people on the wrong side of the pitch who don't do that because they can't. And I think that when you actually check the goals, it almost more frequently is people who are able to do it with either foot, but who are able to do it. And too many people can't. That's just my argument. And the way the game's developed, as we said earlier, Pep Guardiola actually said that he wanted to play Doku on the right and Savio on the left so that he could get them on their stronger feet on the outside. And he said neither of them felt comfortable. So this is the way the players have been brought up now.
Well, there are other reasons why the crosses don't go in. There aren't enough players in the box. There aren't any centre forwards around. My friend Fulkrug only came on as a substitute, and we'll save him for another day, and maybe there will be more crosses going in. It's just a factor of the way the game is that you've got to get the ball in the net. And as a commentator, you see the team and you think, right, well, he could score. He's very dangerous from set pieces. Casemiro, for example, we just talked about. Yeah, watch out for him.
But
in the box.
You played centre forward. You played centre forward. You want that ball in early.
Yeah, but that's not the way football plays. Erling Haaland, who could demand the ball in early because of his pedigree and his goals, he has to accept that that's not the way Manchester City play. If you want that, go and find a club that will do that, or you're such a great player that they will do it because you want it. He's gone to a club where he's got to toe the line and not see people get to the byline and cross. It's just not the way it is. So the fact that he scores all these goals is a testament to the variety in his way to get goals. We grew up in an era where who was the right when Chelsea won the league in '55? Eric Parsons was it on the right? Frank Blunston on the left.
Correct.
And they crossed the ball into the middle for the attackers, and that's the way football was played. Stanley Matthews, Tom Finney, all the great names from way back. They were wingers. Garincha, they're wingers.
But you have to get the ball in, and I mean, I'll give you an example. I think Jack Grealish really struggles. He cuts inside the whole time on the left. He runs into crowds, and his ability to create chances seems to be reduced since he's gone to Manchester City.
But that's one player's problem. That Manchester City have won the league in all the seasons that he's been there.
True.
So it's a collective, isn't it? You have to work out how your team's going to score a goal. As a coach, you're going to have to say, what strengths have we got? Where does he want to go? Can we get him in behind? I mean, Erling Haaland's very quick, and yet it's very rare that he does. I think that first debut goal, wasn't it, getting behind at West Ham, he got through and finished. But they're getting goals in other ways, and he's getting goals in other ways. So it can't be just one map of how to do it. It is one very good way. As a very ordinary non-league centre-forward of many years past, I loved it when the wingers got to the byline and crossed it, because I had a really good chance of scoring.
I'm asking for early balls in, and I'm thinking that a lot of the time you don't get them.
No, because the midfield players only lend it to the strikers. They want to keep it for themselves.
I know.
That has been the frustration. That if you want to go and play in midfield and have lots of touches of the ball, then go and do it, because that's the way the game is. That's why Pep wants a team of midfield players, and Erling Haaland is an exception. I guess he thought long and hard about bringing him in, and Haaland has done him proud because he plays the Pep way, and he gets 7 or 8 touches in the game and often wins those games. So we could go on. There's more than one way to skin a cat. I shouldn't say that in a room when we've got 2 cats, but football, that's the joy of football.
Right.
There's lots and lots of different ways to score goals.
That is it then, apart from stoppage time.
Stoppage time.
And stoppage time today, we're going back to our old friend Carlo Ancelotti. The Real Madrid manager has announced that he will be giving his players holidays during the season, because with the Club World Cup at the end of it, there is so much demanded from them that they can't get through a season with a number of games without having a holiday. So when they come back from internationals, he's going to give different players time off. And what he basically said is the players need a rest and holidays. We're thinking about individual holidays for the players. A player cannot play for a week and go to rest with his family, especially with internationals. They have very little rest. We're evaluating it with the medical team in our physical preparation. So, for example, if Vinicius goes to Brazil to play 2 games, he'll have 4 or 5 days off when he returns. It's not that he won't play in the next game, it's that he won't train. It's the only way.
Well, he's one of the few men in football who can probably implement this. If they've lost a few games, which perhaps they won't do, he won't be able to do that. He can't send Vinicius off. If he needs to win on the following weekend, he'll play him. I mean, that's the version of it. It's a very hot topic at the moment. But in the end, you'll find that the players will want to play, and also that actually injuries do give them a rest, although they have treatment. They're not training and they're not away. And I do think we all like, let's go away for a few days. That's quite a life pleasure, isn't it, really? And footballers find that very hard to do. And even when they do go away, they get recognised all the time. So I think living in Spain, you probably have a holiday every day of the year, and compared to what we're facing now as the sunshine of early August is disappearing. We have problems recording this podcast because where we are in your kitchen, there's a light comes through. When the sun comes through that, we're in a sauna here. And although we can cope, and our production team can cope, the cameras can't. It's a nice idea, and I think everyone would like to implement it and rest in between work. It's hard to switch off, and it's hard for players to switch off. It's hard for journalists to switch off. I think it's hard for anybody who has a demanding job to switch off. So if Carlo can implement something, he's a magnificent manager. He's a great bloke, and I back him in anything that he decides to do. And I'm sure it's got a lot of wisdom behind it. We'll see. If we're still sitting here and the rain is pounding on that, we haven't had the rain one, we might not be able to broadcast from here if it rains in the winter, and Carlo has done this, I'll be delighted to discuss it again and pat him on the back. But some of those young players who are going to come in are going to get a chance then, aren't they, if that happens. It's interesting that he picked Vinicius, who's probably the player he'd least want to leave out, really. So if he says that, then he means it.
Yeah, I feel a bit wrong talking about Carlo and not having a glass of red wine in front of me, actually.
For me, it's cappuccino. I'm not a non-drinker, so basically, coffee with Carlo is a sheer pleasure.
Okay, that's it. Thank you, everyone, for watching, listening, or just loving the joy of football. From Martin and me.
See you next time.
Ta-ra. Okay, that's it. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. You go off and have a wonderful time. Martin and I will go back to our sad little lives. Martin's off to an academy game at Woking this evening, and I'm off to a UEFA Conference qualifier. What's that? Ta-ra.